I think the U.S. Must understand that this is not about a ceasefire, as good as that would be in a broader context. This is about ending a war. And what we don't know about the discussions that took place in Riyadh is what was said about ending the war. Maybe it's possible that the Ukrainian side said, yes, we accept conditions that could lead to the end of the war, and that those are being communicated privately with the Russian government. It may be that they said no such thing. We don't really know at this moment what occurred in Riyadh. It would be naive, more naive than I think is the case, actually, that this was simply an announcement for a 30-day pause. You know, what's happening on the battlefield is that Russia is winning on the battlefield. In fact, there's a major operation underway in the last few days in the Kursk region of Russia, which the Ukrainian forces had entered a few months ago, which they wanted to hold as a bargaining chip, so-called, for a final settlement. And the Russian forces are clearing out the Ukrainians by the hour right now. So Ukraine is on the defensive. It's retreating. Russia would not stop this effort for no reason. The only way that it would stop would be if the Americans communicate with the Russians that, yes, behind closed doors, the Ukrainians have recognized what is the way to end the conflict. Now, I think on that, there's no mystery. There has been no mystery since April 2022. I would say there's been no mystery since 2015. Indeed, one could go back even before that. What do I mean by all of this? As you mentioned, on April 15th, 2022, there was a draft agreement for ending the conflict close to being signed by Russia and Ukraine. We have that draft agreement. That's not hidden from view. The New York Times published it in 2024. It's a very plausible end to the war. It could have been achieved. Almost 3 years ago, and 1 million casualties ago on the Ukrainian. Probably 1 million Ukrainians have died or been grievously wounded since that accord was pushed aside by Biden's team and by Boris Johnson. They told the Ukrainians, keep fighting. This is what was such a disastrous foreign policy by Biden. The UK is so consistently disastrous in its advice, I don't even expect better. I wince at how ridiculous the UK approach is, but the US should have known better, could have done better, could have enabled a peace already about 3 years ago. So we know what the contours of the agreement would be. And in that interview, it's a terrific interview, extremely informative, extremely interesting, by Foreign Minister Lavrov. He notes that one of the points of the agreement in April 2022 was some territorial concession by Ukraine up to that point of the fighting. In fact, he said now it is worse for Ukraine. Ukraine fought on for 3 years, and they've lost relative to where they were before. They've lost legally, juridically, and on the battlefield. But the contours of reaching an agreement quickly are known. And what are they? They are that Ukraine will be permanently neutral. In other words, it will not join NATO. NATO will not be dangled as something to happen in 5 years or 10 years or 15 years. Ukraine will be neutral. This was the sensible position for the last 30 years. The U.S. could not take common sense. The second is there will be territorial adjustments. There wouldn't have been, before the coup in 2014 that the United States participated in, there wouldn't have been any at all. There wouldn't have been territorial loss in eastern Ukraine, in the Donbas region, or what is called Lugansk and Donetsk, because the Minsk agreement that the U.S. and Ukraine dissed, they signed and then they dissed it, didn't call for territory to go to Russia, but it called for constitutional autonomy of the ethnic Russian regions of eastern Ukraine. Well, they lost that opportunity. In 2022, there were some concessions based on where the contact lines were at that point. But now things have gotten worse. So there will be these territorial adjustments. And the third part of the agreement that was already reached on April 15, 2022, by the way, based on a communique that was jointly issued on March 29th, 2022, which also people can find online, is that there will be security guarantees for Ukraine. And I say rather straightforwardly, because it's the way that things should work in this world, put them through the UN Security Council. That's what it's there for. And so this is the third point. Permanent neutrality, some territorial border adjustments that reflect the events of the last 11 years, actually, and security guarantees for Ukraine, in my view, under the UN auspices. That's how to reach peace. Really, we were there on April 15th, 2022. We could be there immediately. That's nothing to do with the ceasefire, except if in the closed room in Riyadh, Ukraine said, yeah, okay, that makes sense. We were about to sign in April 2022. We'll sign now. Maybe they said that. Maybe that's what's being communicated. But if it's just a ceasefire, it's not going to happen.
Are you of the view, Professor Sachs, that President Zelensky would risk his tenure in his job? I don't want to say in office. It's not a legal job that he has anymore. And maybe even his life, if he were to show some rational behavior and cease the military conflagration. You know, this crew that regulates him from his right would kill him.
Look, I don't know about his personal safety, but I could say something about his political term. It would likely end. He, like a head of state, represented a platform and a position, and terms come to an end. We don't run countries for the sake of our rulers. We don't run countries for the sake of our heads of government. Our heads of government are to be for the sake of the people, not the other way around. That's a principle that was established rightly in the United States in 1776, July 4th, in a very well-written document by Thomas Jefferson, which we call the Declaration of Independence. It was enshrined in the U.S. Constitution in the convention in 1787. With all respect to President Zelensky, you know, terms come to an end. He's ruling under martial law. I don't know, maybe he runs for election and he wins. Okay, that's one thing. But the question of his political term is, frankly, of no particular interest to me, and I don't think should be of any particular interest to anybody. We don't run countries for the sake of individuals. And what we know from both the logic of the situation, the tragedy of the situation, and the opinion surveys in Ukraine is that the Ukrainians want peace. They say so. Peace, even with territorial concessions. How do they express that right now? By trying to flee from people that are grabbing them off the streets and sending their deaths in the front lines because they can't vote on it. This is a martial law regime. So this is, I hope nothing personally happens to him. If that's a risk, he should figure out some way to leave or do something. But I'm not giving him personal advice.
Understood.
But at a political level, We cannot run international affairs for the sake of an incumbent. We need to address the needs of people. We need to address security. We need to address global peace. That's what this is all about.